there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
Yeah, that's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, happy... we're almost in... Is it the beginning of fall?
It's officially September. It's not the beginning of fall yet.
Fall, yes. Yes. That happens in September, though, doesn't it?
September 22nd.
The classic dad's birthday.
That's Bilbo Baggins' birthday, too.
That's true. That's true. The fall solstice is classic dad's birthday. So we'll probably talk about it again. But if we forget, happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday, Dad. This episode's very early for wishing classic dad a happy birthday.
We may forget closer.
We may forget closer. That's true.
So just in case we forget, happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday, classic dad.
Yeah. So how have you been?
Good. Nothing to complain about, but who knows? I'm always down to complain.
Yeah, the day is still young.
The day is still young, and so am I. What about you? What has made you happy recently? Have you done anything advantageous? Have you done anything that's noteworthy? Anything like beating a video game?
Oh, maybe I have. That's a great segue. I did beat a video game. It's actually a video game that I think I talked about at least twice before. Once before when we were doing the Next Fest thing, and once again as my recently played. But I have I beat a game alert, as it were, it's because it happens so infrequently. I just want to say that I beat a game, and I recently beat Is the Seat Taken? ? Which was, as a reminder, a fun puzzler game where you have the objective of figuring out where people need to sit or sometimes stand. And it was a joy figuring it out. It was a puzzler game that was tough, but it was not too tough, which is my favorite type of puzzle games. A game that makes me feel smart when I play the game, but it doesn't make me feel dumb by being too complicated because I don't like to feel dumb. I like to feel smart, but I'm also not too smart. So I need games to be just difficult enough. And Is the Seat Taken? Was perfect for that. But I've also recently been playing the demo for Food Truck Empire. Food Truck Empire is being developed by Lichthund and doesn't have a release date set, but there is a demo on Steam. It's a economic strategy tycoon game where you manage and design your own food truck enterprise. So you're not just managing one food truck, you're managing multiple food trucks, and you're not necessarily making the dishes in the food truck. You're building combinations of dishes, and certain people may like hamburgers and other people may like more meat on their burger than regular. And so you need to figure out how to attract those customers to the right truck to make the most money. So you're doing like market research, you're looking at the map, you're developing up like the levels of the various different spots. Like there's a food truck park that you kind of level up to get more people to go to, as well as your own headquarters. And it's a cool lot of customization options. The demo is restricted in regards to cooking various types of burgers, but however, in the future, it looks like you'll be able to make like tacos and bowls and all sorts of different dishes. You can also customize and paint all your trucks and develop new technology. So it's a pretty cool game. If you like kind of like a business management tycoon style game, check out the demo for Food Truck Empire. It is free because it's a demo, and there's also a beta test option that you can try to opt in, but it's on developer approval only.
Nice. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it is. Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing Smash Remix. Recently, I actually picked up a Summer Cart 64, which is a N64 flash cart, and I've been throwing on different ROM hacks and Japanese exclusive games translated into English and different things like that. Stuff that would be harder to get on an actual cartridge here in the United States without getting a reproduction cartridge or something like that. But I've been playing through Smash Remix, which is a ROM hack of the original Super Smash Bros. Now, this ROM hack not only adds a bunch of new levels, it also adds a ton of new fighters, such as Peach, Bowser, Dr. Mario, Sheik, Ganondorf, Young Link, King Dedede, Falco, Wolf, Mewtwo, Marth, Wario, Sonic, Conker, Banjo-Kazooie, Marina, Goemon, and Crash Bandicoot. And there are also bonus characters that are like reskins with slightly different modified abilities, such as Dr. Luigi, Lanky Kong, the Mad Piano from Mario 64, 64, that enemy that like attacks you, you can play as Mad Piano. There's Supersonic, Slippy Toad, Dark Samus, Lucas. It just keeps going. It's a massive, massive hack, and it's really, really cool to see what they were able to shove into a game like Super Smash Brothers, which always felt so limited. Like the small roster, the lack of levels. Super Smash Brothers, I think, is a really fun game, but at the same time, it was made immediately obsolete when Melee came out because Melee added so many more characters and so many more levels. But this pretty much brings in like Melee style content into the original Smash Brothers. It also does some slight modifications to the controls to make them a little less bad. And overall, it's just kind of a really neat remix, as the name implies. It was being worked on pretty regularly for the last few years, though most recently version 2.0 is the like final version according to the developers. Though who knows, maybe they'll put out some other patches in the future or small updates in the future, but they said they're pretty much done putting in major content. And it's just been a fun time to try it out. I'm definitely looking forward to maybe next brocation bringing my summer cart with me so that me and the bros can play some Smash Remix.
Oh, yeah.
Well, to get into today's episode, we are doing another Sean recommendation. That's right. Intern Sean actually gave us 2 recommendations. So we are doing the second one that he recommended. And we're talking about actually something that I think Seth has more familiarity with in terms of his personal history versus my own personal history with this topic, and that is Vampire the Masquerade. Seth, before we get into talking about Vampire the Masquerade, its history, what are your memories of Vampire the Masquerade?
Yeah, so Vampire the Masquerade is a role-playing tabletop game, which I have played on or off for the last 15 years, give or take. It's a gothic role-playing game, and it's a little different and deviant versus the traditional Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. So it's a little bit more... I guess there was always the description, there's role play and then there's role play, and one being ROLE and the other being ROLL, which being like one being an emphasis on the role playing aspect of the character and the other being an emphasis on the combat. D&D for me has always been the latter, an emphasis on the combat, and Vampire and the various other White Wolf or World of Darkness, because it's now owned by a few different companies, various other World of Darkness games were more about role play, the previous, in really acting out a character. And they've done a number of different, Vampire is their staple, but they also did, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about it, but they did Werewolf, Mage, Changeling, and even some like Mortals games. And it's very much... A lot of the games, though, if you look at them all, they're all very tragic and about fighting your inner demons, and a lot after Vampire... Well, even Vampire. There's this inner struggle within every character. So, like, vampires have the beast within them. Werewolves have, like, this rage within them. Wraiths have a shadow. The changeling aspect themselves is in another mortal. It's just like weird common themes throughout the games. And so the flavor tends to, if you like it, it's just kind of like a different dressing on the same general cake, as it were.
Yeah. Well, to get into the history of Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire the Masquerade, as Seth alluded to, is part of a series of games called World of Darkness, which are all part of the same universe. And this was created by Mark Greenhagen in 1990. Mark originally was the founder of a different game company before he would go on to be the founder of the company that created Vampire the Masquerade. He was the founder of a company called Lion Rampart with Jonathan Tweet while they were still attending school. In the early years, they would publish a game called Ars Magica, a historically grounded role-playing game set in the Middle East in 1200 AD, but with elements of folklore and magic still prevalent in the world they created. It was also at school where they would meet Lisa Stevens, who would volunteer at Lion Rampart as she had experience with editing. The reason Lisa volunteered at Lion Rampart and they didn't just hire her on is because Lion Rampart wasn't really a for-profit business. It was a volunteer company. Everyone was volunteering. They did actually run into financial difficulties. And Lisa would recommend that they should probably look for ways to make money and kind of better get themselves acclimated to having a business. So what she would recommend is that they merge with a magazine called White Wolf Magazine. And this merger would be pitched and accepted, and the company became White Wolf Game Studio, with Mark Rein-Hagen becoming the co-owner and the other co-owner being Stuart Week, the founder of White Wolf Magazine. In 1990, Stuart Week, Lisa Stevens, and Mark Rein-Hagen would take a road trip to Gen Con. While on the road, Mark got the idea for a new game that would become his main focus into the next year. Mark's idea for a game was about vampires, but not about hunting vampires as you might expect, because that was just boring to him. He wanted a game where you were the vampire. That game would become Vampire the Masquerade. He drew inspiration from a variety of sources, such as other role-playing games like RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu. He was also inspired by the movie The Lost Boys, directed by Joel Schumacher and released in 1987, and he would later read Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, though he intentionally chose not to read it initially because he didn't want to avoid any comparisons between his game that he was developing and Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. And I'm going to assume he wanted to possibly avoid litigation, because if there's one thing that Anne Rice is known for, it was being very litigious. Another big source of inspiration was Mark's personal upbringing. He grew up in a very religious household, and he wanted to lean into the religious elements for this game. One of these elements would be the story of the original vampire in Vampire the Masquerade, being Cain, though in Vampire the Masquerade it's spelled C-A-I-N-E versus C-A-I-N, which is how it's spelled in the Bible. For those who aren't up to date with their Bible lore, the story of Cain and Abel is about two brothers who were devoted to God. God prefers Abel. Cain gets jealous. Cain murders Abel. God punishes Cain by outcasting him and leading him to a life of being a nomad and sentencing him to the land of Nod, where supposedly a land that's east of the Garden of Eden. It's never quite sure where it is. In the lore of Vampire, Cain, spelled with an E, would go on to become the first vampire, and that land of Nod is where he would reside. And there's a book of Nod which explains this in more detail.
Yeah, and throughout the canon of Vampire, Cain is able to create other vampires, and those other vampires are able to create additional vampires. What ends up happening is part of the defining characteristics in the game is what's known as your generation. And the lower your generation, meaning the closer you are to Cain, the more powerful your character is. So Cain embraced a couple of people, I think one or two, maybe three. I'm not exactly sure. But then those people embraced 13 vampires, and they are third generation, or what's known as antediluvians. And those antediluvians all represent a different cast of vampires, which the game calls a clan, and that cast of vampires has their own powers and flavor to them. And that's where the character customization comes into play. By picking your lineage, you kind of pick your power sets. So there is Ventrue, Bruja, Malkavian, Gangrel, Lasombra, Tzimisce, and so on and so forth. And a further double click into the lore is that all the vampires, they have a set of rules that kind of really safeguards their life because they don't want to be discovered by mortals, and they want to maintain what's known as the Masquerade. Hence the name of the game, Vampire the Masquerade, because they are going around pretending not to be vampires. And there's an organization that runs the Vampire Society, and that is called the Camarilla. The Camarilla are essentially, it's the bureaucracy of vampires, but at some point in time, sections of the vampire groups decided that they no longer wanted to be part of the Camarilla, and so they broke off and formed their own factions, and you have the faction that is known as the Sabbat and the faction known as the Anarchs. The Sabbat are more like holy warriors of Cain, and they really want to just be more vampiric, and the Anarchs just don't want to deal with anybody. And so a number of the role-playing games are played usually in one sect, so usually within like a Camarilla, and the game will be a Camarilla game, and the characters, the players, will be members of the Camarilla court. And in the court, there's various different positions, and this is where the game gets to be more about role-playing than role-playing, as it were, and you tend to have more politicking that goes on, different characters vie for positions, and there's different rules and powers that brings into positions, and it really creates this complex organization that if you're on top, you can really set the rules for yourself, and if you're on the bottom, you just kind of have to play by everybody else's rules. It's a very interesting world, and that's where a lot of the different games like Werewolf, Changeling, Wraith, Mummy, Mage kind of deviate, is that they all have their own caste systems as well. They have different factions and societies, and generally they have one or two factions within each of the games that are fighting each other. The gameplay mechanics for World of Darkness would go on to be developed by Tom Dowd, who co-designed Shadowrun. Dowd would come up with a comparative dice pool system, though instead of D6s, which he used in Shadowrun, you use D10s, which I am very familiar with because the first time I ever played the Vampire tabletop game was many, many years ago, and I was confused that somebody had showed up with a bag of like 40 D10s, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on. I remember you stacked things based on D10s, because it's a dice pool, and you roll a number of dice based on your skills stacked with other skills, and then you count the number of successes against the difficulties, and sometimes 10s explode, so you reroll 10s. I just remember I had a character, one of my early characters was this character named Kemp, who was a large man. He was a giant man, and he was a member of the Sabbat, and he was also a Bruja, and that character had strength 5 and potence 5, and like brawling 5 or something stupid. It was all like, that's all he did though. He didn't do much else other than punch people or throw things. And so I had to, at one point in time, we were mad, or we were trying to cause a scene, and so I picked a car up and I tossed it into a building, and I had to roll my strength plus I think it was either my athletics skill or something, plus my potence, and I ended up rolling like 15 D10s, and then the 10s would all explode. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, it was like 15 successes, and like one success was enough to hit the bill. So it's just like, it's so like overcharged whatever was happening. That's how like those type of dice systems work. They're also very easy to teach somebody. A game system like White Wolf and or the World of Darkness game systems, especially the older edition that I learned on, very easy to pick up and play. There was actually a series of really cool games that was, I believe, also done by White Wolf, that was called the Trinity Role-Playing Trilogy, and it composed of the game called Action, Aberrant, and Trinity. And they were superhero games that you played at various different levels of superheroing. So like Action was set in like the olden time, and you were like characters like Annie Oakley, so you were like a sharpshooter or something, or you could be like Thomas Edison, and you could have like extreme intelligence or extreme scummy abilities, as Thomas Edison had. But then there was Aberrant, which was superheroes, so you could have like invisibility, super speed, and all that stuff. And then Trinity was like set in the far future. I bring it up because it also used the same system that White Wolf used, which was a D10 system, and it was very, very, very easy to learn. So you could teach someone like within, I want to say like 20 minutes, you can teach them the rules and they're ready to roll. Almost similar to Paranoia. We played Paranoia on our brocation, and I think we had the rules understood pretty quick. Very similar to that in regards to how the rules work, where you're just rolling against difficulties. Makes the rules in combat less important to the development of the characters themselves. Now, the first version of Vampire the Masquerade would be published in 1991, with a second edition following in 1992. Along with the core rulebook, there were also adventure modules such as Blood Nativity set in Cleveland, Ashes to Ashes set in Chicago, a sequel to Ashes called Blood Bond, and Alien Hunger set in Denver, featuring a vampire version of Louis Pasteur. There were also various source books for different settings like Chicago, Milwaukee, Mexico, and New England. There is a source book that is called Dark Colony, and it was set in New England and primarily covered the vampires of Hartford. There was some vampires out of Providence. They were connected with the vampires in Hartford, New Haven, and it actually covered really that part. I think there's passing references to Boston. I'm pretty sure Boston had its own source material. So Dark Colony was like the source material for not Boston, not New York. It covers like the vampires who lived in Connecticut and Rhode Island and Vermont and New Hampshire, which you can imagine the population of those states could support a huge vampire population. Yeah, I think the newest one would be the source book for Boss by Night. So I think actually for original source material, I think it's in just our colony, which is covered in Boston.
The Malkavians and the Toreadors are supposed to be from Massachusetts, so I assume Boston.
From Massachusetts. Well, I think they're from not Boston, because Boston. I think Boston at least during some of the canon that we went through, is Boston was in the hands of the Giovanni.
Oh, okay.
So Boston was an independent city that was controlled by the Milliner family, which was a subfamily in the Giovanni family, and they were hat makers, also out of Boston. And they were rivals. The Milliners were rivals with the Kennedys. And in the vampire continuity, somebody arranged for the Kennedy.
Lee Harvey Oswald was a vampire?
No, well, he was hired by a vampire in the vampire continuity.
That's less fun. I want Lee Harvey Oswald to be the vampire.
No, he was killed by Francis Milliner.
And that's like a thing with vampire is, I don't think you kind of touched upon it, but like it's very much like a mob drama, but with
can be. It
vampires.
It can be. It depends on who's playing it. The game also takes place, because it's vampires. The game can be played in any setting.
Yes, yeah. Which we'll talk about when we go to the video games.
I've done role-playing games in the Dark Ages. I've done role-playing games in modern day. I've done role-playing games in like Victorian time period. So it's just like you just set it wherever the players want to play, and you play it. Modern play is probably the more popular setting, but kind of like an alternate reality, as it were. And then in 1993, White Wolf would go on to publish Mind's Eye Theater, which is a rule system for the Vampire Masquerade live-action role-playing game. There was also a card game system that was released around this time called Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, which was published by Wizards of the Coast. I had some friends that were really into the card game. Beyond Vampire, White Wolf would also publish games set in the same universe, which would include Wraith the Oblivion, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Changeling the Dream, and Demon the Fallen, Hunter the Reckoning, and Mummy the Resurrection, of which I've played all but Mummy and Demon. I've played every other game. So I've played Wraith, Werewolf. I played a guy by the name of Captain Foley, who was named after a Call of Duty character. He was dead. He was a dead World War II guy, because Wraiths are dead. I played Karn, who was a werewolf in Werewolf. He was a werewolf full of anger. So I had a mage by the name of Hagbard, named after a hacker in the 80s named Carl Koch, whose handle was Hagbard. Hagbard was also his handle. It wasn't his real name. I forgot what his real name was. I don't think it was Carl either. I played a changeling that was a puka known as Professor Grant. He was a geologist teacher. I have not played Demon the Fallen. Hunter, I played a hunter by the name of Gabriel, who thought he was also an angel, and I have not played Mummy. I've played other characters within the various different genres, primarily vampire. I've played a number of characters, including Legat, who was a Roman senator, to Donovan, who was an Irish mobster. So I've played a number of different characters through the role-playing game. And they're all based in the same shared universe, and based on the same gameplay system that was built for Vampire the Masquerade. The whole series would be rebooted in 2004 due to dwindling sales as Chronicles of Darkness, which featured revamped versions of the original set of games, but also added a few more to the lot, such as Promethean the Created, Geist the Incinerators, Beast the Primordial, and Deviant the Renegades. Beyond the revised rulebooks, the gameplay system was also updated with various tweaks, and this is where a lot of people started to deviate. The whole series has been rebooted, I believe, 5 times now. The latest iteration is V5, and I believe V5 has even had modifications after V5. They would shop out the licenses for different, like the LARP and the tabletop. They had different publishers and different people who owned the license, so the rules would deviate, and then they would lose the license and it would go back to somebody else, so the rules would deviate again. Overall, all the IPs just kind of roam around and get rewritten. The best part, though, about a role-playing game is once the book is written, you can use it whenever you want.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because it's a tabletop game. You can run whatever version, Zach. Zach and I were just talking about a Paranoia game that I ran for Brocation. We ran the latest edition of Paranoia, but we would have had just as much fun if we ran the first edition of Paranoia. It doesn't really matter. Kickstarter.
For a while, it's on hiatus right now, but I was in a modified first edition version of Dungeons and Dragons using the OSR system, which is based on very original first edition D&D, but slightly fixed, so it's not as clunky as that edition was. But that being said, it's because these rules are out there, it's very easy to just play a role-playing game using the rules that you want to use.
Right,
and thus, you don't need to be a purist about the rules.
and it's a role-playing game. You can play in the world you want to play in, too. So you can make the setting. If you don't want the Milliners to own Boston, they don't have to in your world. The intellectual property of Vampire and the World of Darkness would also be adapted into other formats. Various novels were released. A ton of novels were released. Not going to say they're any good, but a ton of them were released.
But they're out there.
So I really wanted to read the various different clan novels. There's a novel for each of the clans throughout Vampire, so it's like 13 books. And I made the dumb decision of buying them in a collection book that released them chronologically, not publishly. So when you read it, it just is confusing because you should not read those books chronologically. You should read them based on their published dates. There was also a comic series that was recently published in 2020. Probably some comic series older time as well. There was a TV show called Kindred the Embrace that aired 8 episodes in 1996, which is bad. It's very, very bad. A lot of the media, actually, as we will talk, a lot of the media outside the role-playing game and one video game aren't that good, including Kindred the Embrace. That show, some people love it because it's nostalgic. It's bad. It's bad. Also, Underworld, which is not necessarily bad, but Underworld and all the spin-off Underworld, like Evolution, all those movies tie back to the White Wolf world. They're very thematically off of it, and they came out around the time when the vampire games were very popular.
And of course, there are video games.
I would hope so for a video game podcast.
Now, the World of Darkness had a bit of a troubled start with video games. One of the first games that was intended to be released, but got canceled, was an adaptation of the game Werewolf the Apocalypse, turning it from an RPG game into a 3D brawler. This game was going to be developed by Capcom for the PS1 and Sega Saturn, and it was going to potentially be the first in a planned series of werewolf games developed by Capcom and released for various systems. A lot of work had actually gone into the project. There is video you can find online, and I think there was a leaked demo for the Saturn that came out around 2009, the leak. So you can play a very unfinished build of Werewolf the Apocalypse for the Sega Saturn. It's not great. Mostly because it's unfinished and also because it's not great. And reportedly the reason it had all these issues was stemming back to the fact that the game started out as primarily an action game and then got retooled mid-development into an RPG game due to some internal discussions. So they had to rework the game from being a primarily action title into being an RPG, which sounds very complicated to me, and it was so complicated, in fact, got the game outright canceled. Another game in development in 1999 was also planned to be released based on Mage the Ascension, developed by Hyperbole. This would have been a 3D role-playing game with single-player and online multiplayer elements. However, this would be canceled in 1999 due to a lack of distributors interested in releasing the title. And then a third game based on Werewolf the Apocalypse called Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of Gaia was intended to be released on PC sometime in the later part of 1999, but was canceled in 2000 because the publisher, ASC Games, shut down and no one wanted to finish the game. So far, World of Darkness has had zero luck getting a video game off the ground, and it's been out for a while, but after plenty of misses, the first World of Darkness video game would be finally released in 2000, Vampire the Masquerade Redemption.
Development began on Redemption in 1998 at Nihilistic Software. The company was founded by former employees at LucasArts who wanted to develop more than just the FPS titles that they had previously been working on. The team started working on an RPG game that would base elements from Vampire the Masquerade, specifically the gothic aesthetic and urban fantasy setting. Activision would approach the team and offer them the White Wolf license, which they would use to officially rework their game to actually be based on the World of Darkness setting. The game took around 2 years to develop, with about 12 people working on the game throughout the development. It also had a budget around $1.8 million, which was intentionally set low by Activision to avoid the risk of the game being a failure. Reportedly, Nihilistic had the entire team work in one room environment that had no walls, doors, or independent offices separating anybody. I'm sure there was a door to get into the room, since
probably walls around the room, because otherwise they were outside.
But they were not separated. They were essentially in a conference room. They felt this would help the team work together and foster collaboration, and also save time on development because it was faster to just ask someone a question directly. Due to the small size of the team, music, sound effects, and artwork was outsourced to different external contractors, with a lot of them, such as Nick Peck and Peter Chan, being previously involved in other LucasArts games. The game would be officially released in June of 2000 to PC. A version was announced for the Dreamcast, but Nihilistic was unable to find a studio to port it, so it would go on to get canceled for the Dreamcast.
Redemption is a third-person role-playing game. There's an optional first-person view that you can use. You just have to toggle it, and you can see the player's surroundings, but it's primarily played from a third-person perspective. Much of the game is controlled via mouse click, such as attacking enemies, opening chests, other items that you encounter, and you are able to have a party of 3 allies, and you take control of the various allies in battle. Characters can also be set to a defensive stance, neutral stance, or offensive stance. Weapons in the game consists of various items. There's like bows, guns, stakes, swords, holy water, and yeah, anything that you'd imagine. Characters are susceptible to sunlight because vampires don't do well in the sun, and you get to use vampiric powers called disciplines that you can use to assist you with different attacks, such as one discipline that allows you to mesmerize an enemy or potential feeding person. Like if you need to feed on someone, you can mesmerize them. As you are vampires, it's important to keep your blood levels in check. You can find blood containers to help increase that blood level, but you're also able to feed on NPCs. If you feed on too many innocent characters, it will reduce your humanity, and you can enter a frenzy state where you will attack both allies and enemies. So don't eat too many innocent people. Redemption also includes an online element, allowing a player to serve as a storyteller and have access to an entirely different interface than the main player. The storyteller can then create scenarios for the other player and assume the role of any other character in game. This sounds incredible. Like, this is the kind of unbalanced multiplayer that I would love to do. I would love to play a full multiplayer game where I'm the computer and I control everything around my friends, and I just place monsters behind doors and stuff like that. That just sounds incredible. Now, the game itself is set in 2 different time periods. It starts in 1141 Prague, where a crusader named Christoph Ramold is wounded. He falls in love with a nun, then gets turned into a vampire because he gets tasked with defeating a monstrous vampire that's been tormenting the city, and he's sent into a mine, and he's injured, and he nearly dies, so they turn him into a vampire to keep him alive. After being turned, you learn of a growing feud between 2 of the clans, the Tremere and Zimitsi. These 2 clans are on the verge of war. The nun, who Christoph falls in love with, Inezka, is kidnapped, and he goes to save her. He finds Inezka has been turned into a ghoul, and he gets caught up in a battle, and a castle collapses on him. The game then jumps to 1999, where Christoph's body is pulled from the castle, and he awakens in London from a long slumber that he's been in for about 800 years. He learns that the events that he was present for in 1141 have led to 2 major vampire sects, the Camarilla and the Sabbat, who are now in conflict with each other. So he was there at the beginning of their long feud, and now he must be there for the rest of the feud. And that's where the game mainly picks up. Most of the game happens in the 1999 setting, but the beginning part is in that 1141. When the game was released in 2000, there were 2 versions available, a standalone copy and a collector's edition. The collector's edition came with a hardcover copy of the Book of Nod, which is about Cain, who we talked about earlier. It also came with a Camarilla pendant, a strategy guide, a soundtrack, and an alternate cover to use on the case. The game sold pretty well on release. It was actually the 3rd best-selling Windows game, just behind The Sims and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. By October, it had sold upward to 111,000 units in North America. The game would spend 4 months on the top 30 sales chart before leaving the charts in October. And it also scored decently well at the time. It was mixed positive positive reviews is how I was reading them. It was like some people would be like 5 out of 10, other people would be like 7 out of 10, other people would be like 8 out of 10.
I didn't play all of Redemption, and maybe I do deserve to give it another try. From my understanding of the game as a whole, though, is that it's got a really good story. It's pretty linear. There's a lot of jank.
Yeah, I like this. So Seth posted 2 pictures, which I think kind of emphasize the jank. One picture shows Christoph, I assume awakening in the London lab in 1999, fully dressed as a crusader, just carrying a broadsword in the middle of a lab with a scientist staring him down.
Yeah, the room is huge. That era of game huge where it was very empty and there was like things, but everything in the room is against the wall.
Yes. And then the second picture shows Christoph now no longer holding a broadsword.
He's in a trench
fact
coat.
He's in a trench coat holding a chain gun, blasting some monster in the face while he hangs out with a lady with ginger hair, a man with a mohawk, and a big bat monster.
Yeah, I think the game has a lot of jank. I don't think it's a bad game. I think that it's a weird game. And the thing is,
weird.
I think that it's not only is it a weird game today, looking back with the dated graphics, it was a weird game when it came out. Like it's always been a little janky weird game. Definitely made some choices, being a adventure game that was kind of like a point and click adventure game with action components in a 3D engine set in Vampire. Like it's got a lot going on. However, it was successful. Led to a sequel of sorts being developed, which we'll get into. Beyond the sequel, however, there was also a recent announcement in 2022 that fans were remaking the entire game as a total conversion for Skyrim with the support of Paradox Interactive. However, Activision was not pleased, so the developers of the total conversion have reworked the project to be set in the same setting, but not to be a remake. Because Activision owns Redemption, Paradox owns Vampire. So they can make a Vampire game set in the same setting and be a total conversion of Skyrim, but they cannot remake Redemption because you need permission from Activision.
Right.
And Paradox doesn't care. Back to the sequel of sorts. Redemption did pretty well and made some good money, and thus it made sense to develop a sequel. The sequel would not, however, be handled by Nihilistic. Instead, development was given over to Troika Games. Development began at Troika in 2001 when Activision was approached by Troika with an idea that they had for a first-person role-playing game. Activision suggested they use the Vampire Masquerade license that they still had, and then it could be a sequel to Redemption. Troika would research the game Redemption and went back to Activision and said, no, we don't want to make a sequel to this game. Why don't we just do our idea that we had in the license of Vampire the Masquerade? And Activision said, oh, all right, we don't care. And Troika said, okie dokie. And they would go and start development on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The team wanted the game to be in 3D. They were approached by a Valve employee who suggested they use the Source Engine. Troika would agree to use it, mainly due to facial animations and lip syncing. The Source Engine was still pretty new at the time, and Troika was completely unfamiliar with the code. And to deal with this, the team had to write their own code to fix various issues that they were running into. During this process, they developed a lighting system, a particle system, a clothing system, and incorporated their own AI system that did not really work well with the Source Engine. And it is clear, playing this game at any point in time in its release, and the amount of constant patches that you need to apply to it, that they did not know what was going on with this engine. And this was not the right choice, period.
Yeah, the Source Engine was actively in development when they were developing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. So it wasn't like they were being handed this engine that wasn't finished. So there was no AI system in Source yet.
And they pushed that engine to do things that it really wasn't going to end up doing.
Because they didn't know.
They're like, I know you're making a Source Engine, which is all about Gordon Freeman and fighting off all these combines. But you know what I really need? I really need the particle effects for a woman's skirt as she walks across a club.
Yeah.
What's funny is if you wanted to do any sort of cheating in Vampire Bloodlines, it's done through the classic console system set in the Source Engine, and so it feels like you're playing
SV cheats.
And honestly, when I opened up the console at one point in time, I was like, I feel like I'm playing a mod of like like Gary's mod.
Yeah, Counter-Strike or
it's like
or,
like a
Half-Life
total
2.
conversion of Half-Life 2 is just what Vampire the Masquerade is. Now, during their research into Vampire the Masquerade, the development team found that most of the people weren't interested in the stats or the powers of the Vampire RPG, but were more interested in the character interactions in the vampire societies, the role to the roleplay, ROLE, not ROLL. They also tried to keep the game faithful for the RPG, but they found that it was difficult translating an inherently multiplayer tabletop role-playing game into a single-player PC game. This would lead to only 15 of the 30 pen and paper abilities that made it into the final game, but I believe almost quadrupled the number of clans that you can play versus the Vampire Masquerade game that's currently in development.
Yeah.
The team also struggled with the combat system. They were familiar with turn-based RPGs, but they weren't entirely sure the best way to implement a real-time system that had customizable attributes. And I'm going to be honest, as somebody who has beaten this game multiple times and loved this game to pieces. After the publication of this game, they were still not familiar with combat system, and they clearly struggled with it. That game has combat is the weakest point in that game, and it is either over in 5 seconds or either way, either you're dead in 5 seconds or they're dead in 5 seconds, or it's like or you're like trying to jank it around by like going through weird things to keep the fight going. There are in fact things that need to be patched out for the combat in order for the combat to work. But one of the things that they instituted into the game is different skills that governed your ability to do things. So you had skills and you had attributes and you had disciplines. Mm-hmm. Disciplines are your powers. Attributes are your strength, dex, and those type of abilities. And then skills were like your firearms, your security, and stuff like that. And you combine them to get total ability. In the game, it's set in the modern day, there are guns. Any character can use a gun. If you don't have the firearms ability, you cannot use a gun well. They replicate by having like when you shoot, the gun goes like crazy and the reticule is massive. And as you become better in firearms, the gun becomes better and you get better at the shot. Though it's done based on an XP system, which is not really suited for a video game. So the progression is slow and you can only go down certain paths with your character, which ends up making it so that you replay the game, to be honest. And they also really custom develop everything, which I don't know if you'll get into a little bit more, but like every game plays a little different for every clan that you play as, including the dialogues, which is part of the fun of the game. One of the things that I also want to mention is when the game came out, there is one of the levels in the game, one of the early levels in the game is one of the standout levels of the game. It's a level where you go into a haunted mansion and the mansion comes alive, pots and pans fly all over the place. It is by far one of the creepiest missions around. Still creepy today. I can blast through it pretty easily because I've beaten it a number of times, so like I know where all the jump scares are. But like when I was playing it originally, terrifying level. There is a code to skip that entire mission that some developers had to use because the mission was too scary. So there was a code
it's kind of cute.
There's a code built into the game where you can skip that mission because back on the back end, like testers or some people were just turned off by that level. So if you like horror and you want to check out a cool, either watch somebody play through it or play through it yourself, it's the early hotel levels of Vampire the Masquerade. Bloodwines. One of the other things that I really liked in the game was every clan they all have advantages and disadvantages. There's literally like, this is your advantage, this is your disadvantage. And so for some of them, like Ventru, they can only feed on certain people. Malkavians are insane, and Nosferatu are very ugly. In Vampire Masquerade Bloodwines, you can play as all of those, and the Nosferatu are very ugly, and you cannot walk in the main streets of the game until you develop a powerful enough level to hide yourself. You literally need to spend the entirety of the game in the sewers, going from place to place, because you are a violation of the Masquerade, and eventually hunters will come and get you if you violate the Masquerade too many times. And so I love that part of the game where it's just it's almost like an immersive sim Vampire of the Masquerade. Like it's almost an immersive vampire game versus like a role-playing game. It's like an immersive sim. It's like really acting out these characters from the role-playing game, which is really great.
Now, it was decided to make the game a first-person game to better immerse the players and also allow players to have up-close interactions with NPCs. To help with the immersion, it was also decided to only follow a single player. They also incorporated a non-linear style of gameplay to allow players to have a bigger role in the system. They wanted every area of the game to work with different play styles. If you wanted to go into an area guns blazing, you could. If you wanted to go in arm swinging, you could. If you wanted to be stealthy, you could. If you wanted to be a Nosferatu, go ahead. Now, the various snags that the team ran into led to the game's development taking a bit of time, but one particular snag was completely uncontrollable. In 2003, Valve experienced a major security breach when hackers stole source code for Half-Life 2. This breach required new security features to be implemented into the source engine and caused the game to be delayed, along with Half-Life 2 to also be delayed. On top of that, the team did not have a producer during any of this time until a year into development when David Mullick joined the team as producer. And when he joined, he thought that the game was largely incomplete, and he would nix various elements such as a planned multiplayer element that they were thinking of adding in. There was also the issue of the team stretching their resources to the breaking point. Due to all the different play styles you can have, different facets of the game had to be specifically coded to allow a player to play the game the way they wanted to. This meant unique animations, specific stealth AI, specific AI related to melee combat, etc., etc. The game had over 150 characters with 3,000 unique animations. That might not sound like a lot in today's, world of massive role-playing games, but contrasting that with contemporary first-person shooters, those usually had about 10 to 20 unique characters. The team was also very stubborn. They often wouldn't remove content if it was unnecessary, meaning certain parts of the game would be less refined than other parts of the game. This would lead to developers having their focus be shifted all over the place as they were trying to refine these unfinished areas that probably could have just been removed. Also, any time they wanted to add something new, they had to run it both past White Wolf and Activision before it was implemented, meaning that they would come up with an idea, maybe start to program the idea into the game, realize they didn't get approval, go to White Wolf, wait for approval, go to Activision, wait for approval, and then implement the thing, and then probably find out it didn't work. The game entered a place where Troika wasn't even sure if it was going to be finished. In fact, during development of Bloodlines, Activision would give more money to Troika, not so they could finish Bloodlines, but so they could finish Temple of Elemental Evil for Atari, and then they could finish Bloodlines. So Activision gave money to Troika so they can finish a game that wasn't Activision's.
Yeah, I want to tell you something about Temple of Elemental Evil. It's a great game, full of jank.
Also full of jank, yeah.
But pretty much everything Troika touched, full of jank.
But it's just wild to me that a publisher was basically like, you're taking too long in this game we asked you to make. Please finish the other game for our competitor.
At least like Temple of Elemental Evil and Vampire Bloodlines, you're falling into similar competition, but not like 100% competition.
Right, yeah, true.
The audience does get a little bit more niche as you get to Bloodlines, though.
Troika would continue working on the game, and at some point Activision just decided, no, the game is done. It's ready to be released. They didn't wait for Troika to say, we're done. They said it's done. They were still, however, contractually obligated to wait for Half-Life 2 to be published. Again, this is a Source Engine game. It was going to be the first Source Engine game to not be developed by Valve, and Half-Life 2 hadn't even been released yet. So they had to wait for Half-Life 2 to come out before they could put out the game. And Troika said, hey, isn't this a great time for us to get a little bit more money to refine the game while we're waiting for Half-Life 2 to be published? And Activision said no, leading to the Troika team to actually work unpaid to get the game as refined as possible, because they did have a lot of faith in this game and they weren't just going to let it, be released in a state that was unfinished.
I want to just say, as much as we make Activision off as kind of the bad guys in this, at any point in time, Activision could have canceled the project. They could have just said, this project is not going forward, and they could have canceled it, and we would never have gotten what we got today. And after that much delay and pushes and issues that happened, Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines would get released on November 16th, 2004 in a mostly unfinished state, which, to be fair, 20 years later, a lot of games do that and get away with it scot clear and release in unfinished states and release patches later. So this was an oddity at the time, but it really was just the beginning. I purchased the game on day one. I don't know where my original copy is. I've since repurchased the game at least once. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodline sold decently on release. Initially, it sold around 72,000 copies and earned around $3.4 million in sales. To contrast this, Arcanum of Steamworks and Magica Obscura, which was done by Troika, sold 234,000 units and made $8.8 million. And I also feel like Arcanum of Steamworks and Magica Obscura, smaller audience than Vampire the Bloodlines. Like, definitely a more obscure IP. Also a really good game. Also full of jank.
If you want to learn more about Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura, you can listen to episode 98 of the Classic Gaming Brothers podcast.
That's true. We did an episode on it because it's a weird game. Half-Life 2 came out at the same time as Bloodlines and sold 6.5 million units. 6.5 million units, different than 72,000 copies. Would have been 69,999 copies if I didn't buy it, so glad that I pushed it out of it being nice. While critics liked the game, with most reviews being fairly positive, it was considered a commercial failure. In the years since, fans have patched the game to fix a lot of bugs caused by the unfinished state of the game on release. In fact, there is a load order of mods that you need to play and need to install in order to even get the game to run on modern systems. So you need to go and be like, okay, what do I need to run this game? And then what mods do I need to install to be able to get it to a suitable patched level? I want to say that I beat the original game with very few patches, because I beat the game pretty early on, before there was fan patches and all that jazz. And there are also mods that have been developed for the game. So they redo certain things. You can play different clans in the game. There's also fun Easter egg where if you cheat and set all your skills, there's a character by the name of Smiling Jack who does a lot of the intro work, and he's a character throughout the game. He's an anarch. He's also a what's known as a canon character in World of Darkness, and is a character that shows up throughout the novels and other media. Smiling Jack teaches you how to be a vampire in the beginning of the game, and if you cheat, he calls it out and says that you're a cheater. It's very funny. He says, "Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to make yourself so? What do you like? Why do you need this? Well, you're a cheater." And it's just very funny, kind of dressing down because you're cheated. There is other World of Darkness games that would see release during this time. There is a trilogy titles based on Hunter the Reckoning, which I also played. There's a 2002 PS2 and Xbox game of the same name, the Hunter Reckoning. There's a sequel called Wayward in 2003, and a third game called Redeemer in 2003 as well. All three of these titles were developed by High Voltage Software and published by Vivendi Universal. They are third-person action games where you play as hunters who have to fight off various supernatural things. All three would receive mixed reviews. If you ever wanted to play Gauntlet Legends, but as hunters, these are the games that you should play.
They seem fun, but I can see why they got mixed reviews.
They are fun. I've played them all. It is literally playing Gauntlet Legends, except with hunters instead of fighters and wizards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also forgot these games existed, and when I was going through the notes, I was like, oh yeah, Redeemer, I remember these games. They're fine. They're a good party game if you were playing them in 2003. And from there, World of Darkness video games would come to a stop for a bit. Two visual novels, Coteries of New York and Shadows of New York, would get released in 2019 and 2020 as part of the vampire subset of games. There were also a few titles released in the werewolf subset, such as Heart of the Forest and Earthblood in 2020 and 2021, respectively. And I believe that happened after the license holder, Paradox, released the ability to make any type of vampires. So if you go to itch.io, there's hundreds of vampire games because they allowed the open license for indie developers. Was it 2022 or was it earlier?
Yeah, I think it's actually 2022 they did the open license.
Maybe these games were the last of the license holder, like licensees.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
So these four games came out licensees, and then 2022 Paradox said, let's just make a bunch of these games. There is now, Sharkmod would go on to release a Battle Royale game called Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt, and another game called Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song would release the same year from Big Bad Wolf. I played Swan Song. It's okay. I didn't continue to play it, but it's not like I had to put it down for I don't know why I put it down. I think it didn't hook me. Maybe I should give it another try. I should go look up other vampire games to see if there's any that are any good. And then after a very long wait, 2025, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is finally due to be released from the developers, the Chinese Room. It is already facing backlash, and they're already doing some scummy things. So they've essentially locked 2 clans behind being able to play them, the Toreador clan and the Losombra clan. You're not allowed to play. So you could play as Ventrue, Bruja, Tremere, or Banu Hakim, which are also known as Assamites. Those are the 4 clans that come with the base game. You can buy 2 additional clans, Toreador and Losombra. They're not even like, I don't know. I was never a fan of the Toreador clan, so I just feel like locking them behind additional money is like silly. But there's no Malkavian or Gangrel clan, or Nosferatu. Like Gangrel, Nosferatu, and Malkavian are arguably some of the best clans to play as. They're great. They're full of whimsy, and I just am very sad that you can't play as them because that was the best part. I think some of the best times I had playing Vampire the Bloodlines was playing a Malkavian and going up to people and just telling them weird facts about the day. Because the game converted all of the text in the game to ramblings, but they still assigned them to like the dialogue trees, so you didn't even know as a player what your character was asking, which is hilarious, and also like made the game a little harder. So don't play Malkavian for your first go if you want to play Vampire Bloodlines. Also, if you're interested in playing Vampire Bloodlines, I recommend going to either Reddit or doing some community searches in the Nexus mods to look up some quality of life mods. There's also some additional mods that add additional content, cut content, and all that. I recommend all those. I actually probably am due to go back and redo my original playthrough where I was trying to play through the game, but I kind of put it on hiatus for a little bit. So that's it. That's Vampire the Masquerade. Do you have any closing comments before we get on to our retro rewind?
No, probably I should eventually play Bloodlines. I like Source games, so I don't know why I've never played Bloodlines. I played so many Source games.
I think you would really like it. Oh, maybe one day you could stream it. And I can watch you play Vampire the Bloodlines.
That could be a lot of fun. Well, that will do it right now for our Vampire the Masquerade episode. Sean, I hope we covered it in detail. Intern Sean had sent me a note that said, Zach, I want to learn more about Vampire the Masquerade, and I think we gave him more. To get into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Stronghold Crusader, released in 2002 from Firefly. Stronghold Crusader is a real-time strategy game where you play through the Crusades. Interesting choice of setting. It's built in the same engine as the original Stronghold. I played the HD version, which is available on Steam, though I believe it's being phased out for the Definitive Edition, as like all those games are being replaced by their Definitive Edition versions. But I still have the HD version. I mean, Stronghold, but instead of being in England, you're in the Middle East, and instead of defending your fort, you're Crusaders, and you're attacking a lot of like just small towns. It's a very weird game. I love Stronghold. I mean, Stronghold as a whole, I think it's a great game. I've never played Crusader before. I've owned Crusader because I got the whole pack at one point.
Wow, so this was the first time you played it?
This is the first time I was playing Crusader, and I did one of some random mission, and I ended up actually doing really badly. Like, it started me off with my little like area to build, and I started building out things, but I didn't build enough like woodcutters, and then everyone got really mad at me, and a bunch of people just left my town.
Your granary stocks are dwindling, my liege.
And then I got attacked, and then I died. I mean, I love Stronghold as a whole, so it's definitely a game I will try again at some point, and who knows, maybe I'll try Crusader Extreme, because that is another version of the game that I have, and it's apparently the better version of the game, so maybe I'll give that a shot in the future. Overall, I think Stronghold as a whole holds up, so sure, I think Crusader could hold up, if you don't mind the odd setting choice of the Crusades as the game. Next week, Seth, I want you to play a game. I want you to play Master of Magic for MS-DOS.
Great. Zach had me play Michael Jordan in Chaos in the Windy City, developed by EA and published by EA, except in the EU, where it was published by Ocean Software. Also, whenever I say the Windy City, I think of Midtown Madness. Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City was released for the SNES in 1994 for the North American market and 1995 for the European market. You may think because Michael Jordan is involved, it is a basketball game. You would be wrong. It involves you playing as Michael Jordan, and you have to explore levels, platform around, and fight monsters with your basketball. You have to find missing people throughout the level. I believe they're a travel team for college or something, and they're children. Well, they're younger adults, and Michael Jordan is rescuing them. There are also a bunch of different basketballs that have abilities like ice balls and all that. You can pick them up throughout the level, giving you some additional powers. There are 12 people that were at Nintendo Power that put this on the list of 10 worst games of all times, and they were mostly complaining that it was a waste of a license. Beyond the game having some loose controls, it's overall a fine mascot platformer for the 90s, just with a really weird...
The mascot, though, is Michael Jordan?
Yeah, the mascot is Michael Jordan. It's just a weird take. Also, he has to dribble the entire time in the game whenever you move.
Yeah, of course, because otherwise you're traveling.
Yes. He's on like a train fighting people. Like, who's going to yell at him for traveling? That's all I'm wondering.
The ref. Maybe God. Maybe God's Michael Jordan's ref.
Oh, maybe that's true. Providence is Michael Jordan's ref.
Yeah, if he stops dribbling, God's going to blow his whistle.
To be honest, I think it's a passable game. I don't think it's the worst game of all times. I don't think it's even the top 10 worst games of all times. I honestly don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a fine game. It's a weird game, so I don't know if it holds up for playing it today, but it's not a bad game, which I think that's a distinction. It's an okay game. I don't know if it holds up though. Next week, Zach, you could play Blast Core on the N64 on your true N64.
All right. With that, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. If you have any memories playing Vampire the Masquerade, be it Bloodlines, Redemption, or the RPG, send us an email, classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available over podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on Facebook. We're available on Blue Sky. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. We're also available on Twitch and YouTube, Classic Gaming Brothers. And of course, you can find us at www.classicgamingbrothers.com. With that, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
Right.